Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. After the Friday fiasco comes the stunning U-turn. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky now wants to sue for peace. He also wants to sign the minerals deal with America. So what led to this turnaround? Was it the US pausing military aid to Kiev? And what's the response in Washington and Moscow? We'll tell you all about it. Also about Donald Trump's big speech at the US Congress, the longest in American history and arguably the most dramatic. He's also working on another round of tariffs, and apparently India is on the hit list. Can Delhi's diplomacy avert the blow? How are other countries responding to American tariffs? China says it is ready for all kinds of war. And a report on how the European army compares to the US. Can they really defend themselves in the event of a conflict? What is the Arab plan to rebuild Gaza? Why is an old video of the Saudi Crown Prince going viral where he talks about rooting out religious extremism? Why is Pakistan witnessing more violence during the holy month of Ramadan? Why have OPEC plus countries decided to increase oil output at a time when prices are falling? And what happened in the Serbian parliament? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Donald Trump suffers a big setback in the US Supreme Court. It rejects his bid to freeze around $2 billion in foreign aid. This is the first significant ruling on a legal challenge to Trump. In a split verdict, the top court upheld a lower court ruling which had asked the Trump administration to pay for aid contracts already completed. In India, officials raid Kannada actor Rania Rao's residence and seized jewelry and cash worth nearly $500,000. This follows her arrest yesterday at the Bengaluru International Airport. Rao is accused of trying to smuggle more than 14 kgs of gold from Dubai. The UK says no more payments will be made to Rwanda over its abandoned scheme to deport migrants there. London has already paid Kigali more than $300 million. Rwanda says that the money will not be returned and insists that more is owed to it. Amid the US-China tech trade war, Malaysia signs a deal with British chip designer ARM Holdings. The Southeast Asian country wants to bolster its efforts to produce high-end semiconductors. Malaysia is a key player in the vital chip sector. And LeBron James creates NBA history, becomes the first player to score 50,000 career points. This extends his lead as the league's all-time record scorer. James is playing in the 22nd season of his career.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about?
You're right now not in a very good position. You're gambling with World War III. This war would have been over in 2 weeks.
Donald Trump's gamble has paid off. This week, he suspended Ukraine's military aid. He cut off their most important lifeline, and it's worked in the way that he hoped it would. Volodymyr Zelensky is waving the white flag. He has agreed to Donald Trump's demands. Yesterday, he wrote a letter to the US president, and two things stood out. One, Zelensky is willing to come to the table. Basically, he's okay with suing for peace. And second, he will sign the mineral deal with America, the same one that he walked out of last week. Trump read out parts of the letter yesterday. Listen to this.
The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintained its sovereignty and independence. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you.
This is a big U-turn by Zelensky. He says he's ready to work with Trump for peace, which wasn't his first position. Think back to the White House meeting last week. Zelensky was dismissive of peace talks. He asked U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, what kind of diplomacy are you talking about? And that is when things fell apart.
What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
We signed him with gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
So from what kind of diplomacy to coming to the negotiating table ASAP. It's a swift and stunning U-turn by Zelensky, and it tells you how important U.S. military aid is. It is Trump's ultimate leverage over Zelensky. But what will be the impact of this U-turn, especially on the peace talks? First of all, it's damage control. Zelensky wants to repair his ties with Donald Trump because he needs the U.S. president on his side. He hasn't apologized for the spat on Friday, but he did express regret yesterday. Listen in.
What happened at the White House instead of our planned negotiations is regrettable. But we must find the strength to move forward, respect one another, as we have always respected America, Europe, and all our partners, and work together to bring peace closer. I am grateful to everyone who supports Ukraine in this.
And how is Trump reacting? He says he appreciates Zelensky's letter. And surprisingly, so does Russia. The Kremlin has released a statement. They're calling Zelensky's letter a positive development. But will it translate into concrete talks and ultimately a peace deal? Well, Zelensky has a proposal. He is broadly pitching for two stages. The first stage is a truce plus the release of prisoners. No missiles, no long-range drones, no attacks on energy sites, and no attacks from the sea. That is the first stage. In the second stage, Ukraine and Russia will move towards a lasting peace deal. Now, this is very similar to France's proposal. They too demanded a one-month truce. So chances are Zelensky is coordinating with Europe on this, and their goal is quite simple, to see if Russia is serious about a peace deal. If they are, they may accept a truce. If not, they could reject it. Whatever they decide, it will give the West some clarity. But the second stage is more complicated because no two parties are on the same page here. Zelensky wants U.S. security guarantees. Trump is refusing U.S. guarantees. Europe is ready to give those guarantees, but Putin will not accept any guarantees. Do you see the problem here? This was Zelensky's issue with the minerals deal as well. He said it did not give security guarantees. But again, he's made a U-turn on that. In fact, let me quote from his statement. We see this agreement as a step toward greater security and solid security guarantees. And I truly hope it will work effectively. So Zelensky is hoping the mineral deal is a first step and that security guarantees will follow. But Trump has been very clear about his position. He will not give any security backing. He said this repeatedly. All he will give is economic support, and that too not for Ukraine's benefit, but to get his money, to get American money back. So there's good news and bad news for Ukraine here. The good news is Zelensky's U-turn is having a mild effect. He is heaping praise on the United States, even calling Trump a strong leader. All of this will soften the blow from last week's clash. The bad news is nobody's position has changed. We are exactly where we were last Friday. And Trump was right back then. Zelensky does not have the cards. Meanwhile, Russia is on a rampage. Overnight, they launched 181 drones into Ukraine. In Odessa, critical energy sites were hit. It left several districts without electricity. In Pavlograd, missile strikes were reported. They damaged 2 power plants. So the Russian attack is relentless and expanding, which is why Zelensky wants a truce. He desperately needs some time to get his affairs in order, to reset his ties with Donald Trump, and to chart out a war plan. This U-turn may buy him some time, but it won't really improve his position, neither on the battlefield nor at the negotiating table.
President of the United States.
Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order, remove this gentleman from the chamber.
America is back.
Now let's talk about that speech, Donald Trump's first address to the US Congress in his second term in office. Now, the first speech is always significant. It is a chance for the new president to rally support, to build consensus for his legislative agenda. But as you know, Donald Trump is not just another US president. For him, this speech was an opportunity to take yet another victory lap. He did not have the full support of the chamber with this. From the moment he walked in, there were cheers and protests. Trump was unruffled, even when the protesters were right in front of him and staring him down. Take a look at this. This is not normal. That was the message of a Democratic lawmaker from New Mexico. A Republican ripped away her sign. But her message echoed throughout Trump's speech, because nothing about it was normal. Trump spoke for 1 hour 40 minutes, 1 hour 40 minutes, which in itself is a record. It's the longest address to a joint session of the US Congress. During this speech, America's deep political divisions were laid bare. The Republicans cheered Trump on. The Democrats protested. Trump was heckled when he started speaking. One lawmaker was even ejected for interrupting the president.
Seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order, remove this gentleman from the chamber.
That was a Democrat from Texas. Dozens of others chose to protest using signs like the ones on your screen. Signs that said, "Musk steals. That's a lie. Save Medicaid and protect veterans." Democrats waved such signs throughout Trump's speech. The women leaders showed up wearing pink as a mark of protest against the president's policies. And here is what the president told the Democrats.
This is my fifth such speech to Congress. And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me, and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy or to make them stand or smile or applaud. Nothing I can do.
Despite the protests, Trump managed to complete his speech. It was a mix of old and new. He spoke about Ukraine and Zelensky's willingness to sign a deal for Ukraine's minerals. He blamed the Democrats for the rising inflation in the US, and he threatened more tariffs on American trade partners. We'll discuss that in a few minutes, the tariffs bit. Trump also spoke about making Americans rich again. The US president said, "America is entering a golden age."
6 weeks ago, I stood beneath the dome of this Capitol and proclaimed the dawn of the golden age of America. From that moment on, it has been nothing but swift and unrelenting action to usher in the greatest and most successful era in the history of our country.
Donald Trump also mentioned DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and its leader Elon Musk. DOGE has been tasked with making cuts to the U.S. government. Since Trump took office, Musk and DOGE have laid off thousands of government employees. They've slashed hundreds of government programs. The Democrats question the decisions made by DOGE. They say Elon Musk has virtually taken over the U.S. government through his agency. Despite their vocal opposition, Trump defended the work of DOGE. He said Musk and his team have saved billions of dollars.
And to that end, I have created the brand new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Perhaps you've heard of it. Perhaps. Which is headed by Elon Musk, who is in the gallery tonight. Thank you, Elon. He's working very hard. He didn't need this. He didn't need this. Thank you very much.
And Trump is clearly impressed with Musk and his ideas. The U.S. president now wants an American colony on Mars. This is an idea that Musk has long pushed for. He has discussed it frequently in his interviews. He says Mars is an ideal planet. He says humans can settle there on Mars in the future, and Trump seems to have bought into that idea. He wants to plant an American flag on not just Mars, but also beyond.
We are going to conquer the vast frontiers of science, and we are going to lead humanity into space and plant the American flag on the planet Mars and even far beyond.
So Trump now wants to conquer planets. And here on Earth, he has set his sights on Greenland. He made the demand again with an open letter, an open offer for Greenland to join the US. Once again, it was rejected, but Trump is not ready to back down.
Great job. And I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America. And I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
Democrats were laughing, but Trump was not joking. He pitched many radical ideas in that speech, like an Iron Dome for America, the kind that Israel has. The Iron Dome is Israel's missile defense system. It is designed to intercept and neutralize incoming missiles, to stop those attacks. Trump wants one for America. He also has a name for it. He wants to call it the Golden Dome.
As Commander-in-Chief, my focus is on building the most powerful military of the future. As a first step, I'm asking Congress to fund a state-of-the-art Golden Dome missile defense shield to protect our homeland, all made in the USA.
So after golden visas, Donald Trump wants a golden dome for the U.S., and he expects the U.S. Congress to pay for it. Despite those protests and jeers, the speech was classic Trump. He turned his address into a campaign rally where he attacked his political rivals at home and America's allies overseas.
Is charging us 100 or 200% tariff or tax, then we will charge them 100 or 200%.
Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
The world is bracing for a trade war. Donald Trump drew first blood. He slapped tariffs on three major players: Canada, Mexico, and China. A hefty 25% for America's neighbors, Canada and Mexico, and 20% for China. It takes the average tariff from 2.4% to 10.5%. Look at the jump, 2.4 to 10.5. That's the highest level since the 1940s. So Trump's message is clear. He believes that these nations are exploiting the United States, and he's trying to fix it with sweeping tariffs.
The countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn to start using them against those other countries. On average, the European Union, China, Brazil, India, Mexico, and Canada, have you heard of them? And countless other nations charge us tremendously higher tariffs than we charge them.
The retaliation was swift. First up was Canada. They're imposing a 25% reciprocal tariff on American goods. We're talking about goods worth $107 billion. And this tariff will be imposed in two phases. In the first phase, goods worth $20 billion will face tariffs, and in the next 21 days, the rest will follow. Canada is also filing a case at the WTO, that is the World Trade Organization. Ottawa is calling this an attack on its economy.
The United States launched a trade war against Canada, their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense. Canadians are reasonable, and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight. Not when our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake.
His tone has clearly changed. He's not holding back anymore. Justin Trudeau also shot a message for Trump.
Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do. We two friends fighting is exactly what our opponents around the world want to see.
Trudeau seems to have dropped the formalities. He's gone from Mr. President to Donald. Guess he's finally found his voice, and it does make sense because he has nothing to lose. Justin Trudeau has already resigned as Prime Minister. He's just waiting for his party to find a replacement, so he can afford to say what he's saying. Although Canada is not unique in expressing such outrage, the Mexicans are fuming. 83% of Mexico's exports go to the United States. 26% of Mexico's GDP depends on these exports. So Mexico, too, will impose retaliatory tariffs. But the details are not out yet. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum will reveal them on Sunday.
There is no motive, reason, or justification for this decision that will affect our people and nation. We have said it in different ways. Cooperation and coordination, yes. Subordination, interventionism, no. Mexico is to be respected.
Subordinación.
Which brings us to China. On February 4th, Donald Trump imposed a 10% tariff on Chinese goods, and China responded with its own set of tariffs, 10 to 15% tax on U.S. agricultural products. That is what they imposed. Now, Trump has doubled those initial tariffs. There's a 20% levy on Chinese goods coming into the U.S. now, 20%. So Beijing is responding in kind. It is imposing a series of tariffs, up to 15% on agricultural goods, the likes of chicken, wheat, corn, and cotton, 10% on things like pork and sorghum. China has added 10 U.S. firms to the unreliable entity list and 15 firms, 15 American companies, to the export control list. Beijing, too, has taken Washington to the WTO.
If the United States really wants to solve the fentanyl issue, it should hold negotiations with China on the basis of equality, respect, and reciprocity to resolve our respective concerns. If the United States has ulterior motives and persists in waging a tariff war, a trade war, or any other kind of war, the Chinese side will fight them to the bitter end.
It's a strong warning from China. It is ready for a trade war, or any war for that matter. What does this mean for the world? Simply put, tariffs are taxes on imported goods. And guess who pays these taxes? It is not the exporting countries, it is the importers who pay this extra money. So higher tariffs mean higher costs. And that means consumers pay more. The US has historically charged lower tariffs compared to other countries, but Donald Trump thinks that is unfair. He wants reciprocal tariffs, a tit-for-tat system. If a country taxes American goods, Washington will tax theirs.
On April 2nd, I wanted to make it April 1st, but I didn't want to be accused of April Fool's Day. That's not, just one day cost us a lot of money. But we're going to do it in April. I'm a very superstitious person. April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in. And whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth. Whatever they tax us, we will tax them.
But while Trump is busy pushing for more tariffs, his Commerce Secretary is saying something else. It is a man called Howard Lutnick. He says Trump may soon announce a deal to reduce the tariffs on Mexico and Canada. The White House has not commented on this so far. There is no official confirmation of this backtracking. And at this rate, it is hard to make sense of American policy. But they're clearly raising the stakes with no obvious gain. The idea is to get foreign companies to make in America and to support local players, but that will happen in the long run and only if other countries and companies play ball. In the short term, the American consumer will suffer, their expenses will go up, so Trump may have overplayed his hand. He sees this as a test of economic might. He believes that the US can outlast its trading partners. Yes, the US is the strongest player around at the moment. It can hurt its trading partners, but a trade war cuts both ways. It will hurt America too. Experts fear that it could even lead to a recession. And there are enough examples in history to show that this fear is not unfounded. Trade wars have unsavory consequences. The Smoot-Hawley tariffs of 1930 exacerbated the Great Depression. That's when the US slapped tariffs on imports and other countries retaliated and global trade collapsed. This was in 1930. Today's world is far more interconnected. Supply chains span multiple countries. So a global recession may not be off the table. The world is playing a dangerous waiting game. Canada, Mexico, and China have made their moves, but how far will they go? Will Trump double down? And how long will this last? Trade wars, like all wars, are easy to start but very tough to end. Trump, of all people, should know that. Trump's tariffs have already triggered chaos, but he's not done yet. You just heard him speak. What you've seen is only round one. Round two could be even more chaotic because the US president is threatening reciprocal tariffs. He's listed out several target countries, and among them is India. Listen in.
India charges us auto tariffs higher than 100%. China's average tariff on our products is twice what we charge them. And South Korea's average tariff is 4 times higher. Think of that, 4 times higher. April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in. And whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them.
So Trump is promising reciprocal tariffs. They will come into effect on April 2nd, that is less than a month from now. Again, this is a tit-for-tat system. Say India imposes 100% tariff on US cars, then Indian cars will attract 100% tariffs in the US. That is how reciprocal tariffs work. But reports say Trump could go further. He is accounting for subsidies and public incentives as well. Say Indian car makers get state help, maybe in the form of subsidies or tax cuts. Then the tariffs will be even higher than 100%. So India will feel the pinch. Just look at the numbers. Total India-US trade is around $130 billion. US exports make up just $42 billion of this mix. The rest is almost $88 billion, and that is Indian exports. So this trade at the moment is tagged in India's favor, which is why the tariffs will hurt India. The Citigroup has published an assessment. They say the tariffs could cost India $7 billion. Sectors like food, textiles and pharma could be the worst affected. And this will worry India because New Delhi did try to avoid these tariffs. The government gave concessions to the Americans. India cut rates on a number of key American imports like whiskey and motorcycles. Prime Minister Modi also met Donald Trump at the White House. Both of them agreed to conclude a trade deal later this year. But it seems the US president is not waiting around. He is slapping tariffs on India too. The question is, what can New Delhi do? Well, the talks are still happening. India's Trade Minister Piyush Goyal began a US trip on Monday. The visit happened all of a sudden. The minister had events lined up throughout this week, but he cancelled them all to visit Washington. And there he met Trump's top trade official. His name is Jamieson Greer. He's the same man who's drafting Trump's tariff policy. Perhaps this is a last-minute effort to avert the tariffs. We have time until April 2nd. Let's see if diplomacy works. At the same time, India is working on other options, like exploring new markets. The US is India's biggest export market. The Americans make up almost 18% of India's total exports. This sort of dependence is risky. So India is making efforts to change that. Last week, Prime Minister Modi hosted the European Union commissioners. He is looking to seal a trade deal by the end of 2025. As we speak, Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar is in Britain. Again, the mission is a trade deal. Jaishankar met Prime Minister Keir Starmer yesterday. He also met Britain's Foreign Secretary and trade officials. The UK says it wants to supercharge its trade with India. And that is a key here. Trump's tariffs have affected countries across the world, allies, rivals, enemies. It doesn't really matter. Every country is worried and looking for options. The sense of urgency is everywhere. And the key is to use that urgency to make progress, to strike deals that have long been delayed. So to sum it up, India has a two-part response. Part 1 is to keep engaging with the Trump administration. Part 2 is to diversify its trade and to strike new trade deals around the world. As always, balance is key. Like Canada and China, India must prepare a response to Trump, a sort of display of strength. At the same time, it must improve where it can. The World Bank released a report last week. It said, India must reduce and simplify its tariffs. Only then can we attract foreign money. So India does have the wiggle room to make more concessions. They wouldn't just appease Trump, they would also help India's economy. Basically, New Delhi needs a hybrid approach. Talks, retaliation, carrots, sticks, appeasement, the whole shebang. These uncharted times call for uncharted measures. And speaking of uncharted times, let's take a close look at the worst case scenario, because this is what you do in times like these. After all, the world order is changing. There is a clear rift in the Western alliance. A lot of questions remain unanswered. So today, let's try to answer some of them. Questions like, what sort of defense apparatus does Europe have at the moment? Where does the European military stand? How does it compare to the United States of America? And can Europe protect itself without American support? Our next report tells you.
The split between the US and its European allies is widening. Now, Europe faces an important stress test amid a sea of questions. What if the US opts out of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? What if the Trump administration pulls out US troops? Where does Europe stand when it is alone? And how does it compare to the US militarily? Let's start with the basics. In terms of population, Europe's 742 million citizens significantly outnumber America's 340 million. But Europe's combined economy is similar to that of the US, while its defense spending is merely a fraction of America's. The US is the world's largest military spender, with an expenditure of about $968 billion last year. Meanwhile, European NATO members collectively spent $457 billion on defense. So, unsurprisingly, Europe wants to pick up the tab.
We are in an era of rearmament. And Europe is ready to massively boost its defense spending, both to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
This is Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. She has set out a vague proposal to ramp up military spending by as much as 800 billion euros, or some $843 billion. It sounds grand, but this amount will be spread over 4 years. And it's only possible if every European Union member pitches in. So at this point, this treasure chest is mostly a fantasy, and Europe has other urgent problems. First, that of troops. Since the end of the Second World War, US forces have been stationed in and deployed to Europe. Today, it stands at nearly 84,000. But in total, America has a whopping 1.3 million active personnel. This is roughly equivalent to all European countries combined, which stand at 1.47 million. So if the US decides to pull out its troops from Europe, Europe would need at least 300,000 more troops for self-defense to compensate for the absence and generate credible deterrence. But simply raising the troops is not enough. This brings us to the second problem. Europe heavily relies on Washington for its defense needs. This over-dependence for decades has left Europe weak. To deter a hypothetical attack from Russia, apart from additional troops, Europe would need 1,400 tanks, 2,000 infantry fighting vehicles, and 700 artillery pieces. But this is more than the current combat power of French, German, Italian, and British forces combined. This is according to a study by the Bruegel think tank and the Kiel Institute. While this is a hypothetical scenario, here is the reality check. The US has 11 active aircraft carriers, while Europe has 7. The US has more than 4,000 aircraft and 2,000 helicopters, while European armies have about 1,000 aircraft and 500 helicopters. If you dig deeper, the cracks widen. Look at the advanced multi-role fighter jets. Roughly around 600 Eurofighter Typhoons, 300 Swedish JAS 39 Gripens, and 260 French Rafale jets have been built over the last 25 years or so. These are all 4.5 plus generation jets. Meanwhile, the US has produced around 1,100 of the world's most advanced 5th generation F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters and 195 of the same generation F-22 Raptors over the past decade. There is no European substitute for the F-35 yet. However, the jets remain a crucial component of their defense. Apart from the hardware, Europe cannot match up to America's high-tech prowess, including spy planes, radar jammers, and military specialists. So no matter how you look at it, Europe has ample reason to adopt a more resolute stance and bolster its military. Because throughout the international security landscape, there is an acute awareness that the European nervousness is not without reason.
Last month, Donald Trump unveiled a bold vision, a Riviera in the Middle East, a plan to turn Gaza into a luxurious seaside resort, complete with a Trump Tower and panoramic sea views. The plan was controversial. It was, in fact, explosive, because Trump did not just want to rebuild Gaza, he wanted to throw out the Palestinians, to relocate them to some other place. The plan was DOA, dead on arrival, but there was no alternative until yesterday. On Tuesday, Arab leaders met in Egypt. They held an Arab League emergency summit and came up with a counter plan. The meeting lasted for many hours. At the end of it, they proposed a $53 billion plan to rebuild Gaza. So what is this plan? How much time will it take? Who will oversee the reconstruction? And will Israel and Hamas agree to it? First, let's look at the plan. It was proposed by Egypt with a 91-page blueprint called Gaza 2030. The document contained glossy images of picturesque neighborhoods, shopping malls, convention centers, and even an airport. The idea was to rebuild Gaza and open it up to the world to make use of its Mediterranean coast.
Egypt calls for the adoption of this plan at our summit today and the mobilization of regional and international support for it, for it is a plan that preserves the Palestinian people's right to rebuild their homeland and ensures that they remain on their land.
Well, this is what Gaza looks like today, and this is what the Arab world wants to turn it into. But this journey from the vision to reality won't be easy. Egypt has laid out 3 stages of this plan. The first is the immediate measures, which could span over 6 months. This includes removing the rubble and mines, repairing the main highway, turning it into a reconstruction corridor, and then building temporary housing. There will be 7 such sites across Gaza to accommodate 1.5 million Gazans. Each housing unit will have 6 people. So that is phase number 1. Then we come to phase number 2, which could last for around 2 years. 200,000 permanent homes will be built during this time. Basic provisions will be restored like water, electricity, and waste management. Telecom services will be established, and that is phase number 2. Then there's phase number 3, which could take another 2 to 3 years. During this time, 200,000 more houses will be built. A 600-acre industrial zone will be developed. Other important construction includes a fishing port, a commercial seaport, a coastal road, and the Gaza International Airport. They plan to build all of this. The total time for this reconstruction is 5 to 6 years, all 3 phases combined, but it could take longer, maybe up to a decade. This is quite an ambitious plan. The total bill will be around $53 billion. $3 billion for phase 1, $20 billion for phase 2, and $30 billion for phase 3. Total $53 billion. And who will pay this money? Multiple players like donor countries, United Nations agencies, development banks, multinational companies, and investment funds. They will all pitch in. In addition to all of this, conferences will be held to raise more money. And who will oversee this reconstruction? An interim administration. That's what the plan says. It says Hamas will cede power in Gaza and a group of Palestinian independents will take over. They will rule Gaza during the reconstruction.
Egypt, in cooperation with its brothers in Palestine, worked to form an administrative committee of independent Palestinian professionals and technocrats entrusted with managing the Gaza Strip based on the expertise of its members.
Once it's done, the Palestinian Authority will take over. There is no mention of elections. The last polls in Gaza were held in the year 2006, so almost 20 years back. But Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas says that there could be an election next year.
We would like to emphasize that we are fully prepared to hold general, presidential, and legislative elections within the next year if the appropriate conditions are available in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem.
So that's the administrative side. What about security? Well, that will be the responsibility of Egypt and Jordan. They will train Palestinian police. The plan also calls for external help, especially from the United Nations Security Council. There is also talk of deploying a peacekeeping force, especially during the rebuilding process. So that essentially is the Egyptian plan for Gaza. And the Arab world has endorsed it.
There will be no security or stability for Israel or the region without a political solution that fulfills the aspirations of the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people have the right to establish their independent state on all their territory.
It is a grand plan, but will Hamas and Israel agree to it? Hamas has welcomed the rebuilding efforts. It has agreed to an interim government. But Hamas has also drawn a red line, and that is disarmament. Hamas will not give up arms, and it's not clear if it will accept the return of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza. Which brings us to Israel. Israel has not rejected the Arab plan. but it's obviously more inclined to supporting Trump's plan.
President Trump presented a bold and innovative vision for the freedom of migration from Gaza, and this is a vision that can and should be supported. It must be supported. We fully support it, and this vision will allow a different future for the region.
Meanwhile, Washington too has rejected the Arab plan, saying it doesn't reflect the reality. So where does this leave Gaza? Two competing visions, one backed by the Arab world to rebuild and keep Gaza in Palestinian hands. The second, backed by Trump and Israel to settle Gazans elsewhere. Which one will prevail? And will Gaza ever see peace? We can only wait and watch. One leader was absent from the Arab summit. That's Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, aka MBS. An old video of his is going viral on social media. It lays out his vision for the kingdom, the Saudi kingdom. MBS said he wanted to destroy Islamic extremism, that he wanted a moderate Islam in his country. Listen to this first.
We only want to go back to what we were, the moderate Islam that is open to the world, open to all the religions. 70% of the Saudi people are less than 30 years old. And quite frankly, we will not waste 30 years of our lives in dealing with extremist ideas. We will destroy them today.
That was a brave declaration to make, especially at that time, because MBS was appointed Crown Prince that same year, in 2017. He was just 31 years old then. He rose to power after a royal power struggle. To consolidate his grip, he unleashed a purge. Dozens of princes and businessmen were rounded up at a hotel. The Saudi king's allies were sidelined and MBS became the top dog. In fact, that purge happened just a month after this speech. Tells you how confident he was. But the question is, has he delivered? Well, yes and no. The Saudi Arabia of 2025 is not the Saudi Arabia of 2017, and you cannot deny that. Just look at the reforms since then. In April 2018, cinema theatres returned to Saudi Arabia. That too after 35 years. The plan is to have 300 cinema halls by 2030. In the same year, MBS lifted the ban on women drivers. It was the last such remaining ban in the world. Since then, thousands of Saudi women have started driving. In 2019, the guardianship rules were relaxed. Earlier, women over 21 needed their male guardian's approval to travel abroad, maybe their husband or father or brother. That was done away with in 2019. The same year, MBS also welcomed foreign tourists. Until then, the kingdom would regulate visas. Most visas were issued for pilgrims or laborers for specific events. But after 2019, the focus shifted to tourism. Today, Jeddah is being developed as a hub. The plan is to build Saudi Arabia's Red Sea tourism. And the final reform? A weakening of the moral police. Women can now attend sports events or concerts with men. The rules on hijab and abaya have also been relaxed. And these aren't just reforms on paper, they've actually transformed the Saudi kingdom. It has become more open, more welcoming. Just look at the number of foreign tourists. Around 16 million in 2017, around 27 million in 2023, and 30 million last year. So clearly things have changed. But why? And what next? Let's try to answer these questions now. Saudi conservatism dates back to the late 1970s. A wave of Islamism was spreading in West Asia. In Iran, the Ayatollahs captured power. In Saudi Arabia, insurgents captured the Grand Mosque. They accused the royal family of being corrupted by the West. So they tried to topple the royals. The royal response was to turn back the clock. All the modernization programs were rolled back. The reforms were cancelled and Saudi Arabia turned even more conservative. So why is MBS changing that? Well, he highlighted one reason himself. 63% of Saudis are under 30 years of age, 63% of the population. They are young and restless. They don't care about extremism and ideology. They care about going to the movies or getting a well-paying job. If you don't cater to that, they will revolt. That's one reason. A second reason is the economy. Saudi Arabia's oil reserves could run out in 60 years. This may sound like a long time to you, but for a country, 60 years is nothing. So MBS is trying to diversify. He unveiled a plan called Vision 2030. Its main goal was to reduce the kingdom's dependence on oil. Instead, MBS wants to make money from new sectors like sporting events or tourism or entertainment, and even fields like artificial intelligence. He's made giant strides in this direction. Today, Saudi Arabia hosts a Formula One Grand Prix. Its domestic football league has the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo. It is building a Saudi Louvre in Riyadh, and it is eyeing data centers for US tech giants. All in all, a major transformation. None of this would have been possible without the social reforms. Just ask yourselves, would a Ronaldo have lived in Saudi Arabia 10 years ago, in that closed society with no freedoms? No way. Would top tech experts have taken up jobs in Riyadh? Would Western museum curators have agreed to work there? Again, no way. So Saudi Arabia's social reforms are closely linked to its economic future. But are they enough? Nowhere near it. Not all jobs are still open to women. You can't criticize the regime, and of course there is no trace of democracy or transparency. But MBS has done what he could. His challenge is to strike a balance. Too much reform, and you could go the Soviet way. People who taste freedom want more of it. And before you know, you're out. Too less, and it's the same problem. So MBS is walking a tightrope here. He is handling religious scholars, royal rivals, and geopolitical headwinds. A lot of work for a young crown prince. For Muslim people everywhere, the month of Ramadan has begun, or as some call it, Ramadan. This is supposed to be a holy month, a time for prayer and fasting. But in Pakistan, it has become a time for chaos. Multiple terror attacks have taken place in the country, leaving dozens of people dead. Compounding this is trouble at the border. There's a blockade at the Torkham border crossing, the one between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Tensions there led to cross-border firing earlier this week. Our next report has the details.
A suicide bombing took place in Pakistan yesterday. Reports say 16 militants attacked an army base in the city of Badnu in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. First, the attackers rammed two explosive-laden vehicles into the army cantonment's walls. The explosions damaged nearby buildings. This resulted in the death of 13 civilians and left 32 others injured.
के इलाके और केन के साथ जो दीवारें हैं ये सारे गिर गया है। साथ में ये जुमे वाला मस्जिद है और जुमे वाला मस्जिद में काफ़ी लोग अफ्तारी के वक्त इधर अफ्तारी होते हैं। इसकी काफ़ी तादाद में जो है ना रोज़ामाती अफ्तारी के लिए आता है, उसमें भी काफ़ी नुकसान पड़ा हुआ है। और एक ही दो तीन घरों में जो है ना 12-13 लाशें जो है ना ये निकाला है। कुछ जनानियों का है, कुछ बच्चों का है और बूढ़ों का है, ये लाशें भी निकाला है। और ये जख्मी की हालत जो है ना तकरीबन 31-32 जख्मी हालात में भी लोग निकाला हुआ है ना, अस्पतालों में इंदराज हुआ है।
हमारे घर के साथ ही ये धमाका हुआ है। एक हमारा भाई भी शहीद हो गया है और 7-8 बंदे और शहीद हुए हैं।
After the vehicles exploded, other militants stormed the area. A gunfight ensued. The Pakistani military says that all the militants were killed. They also say that 5 soldiers died in the attack. A group affiliated with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan claimed responsibility for the attack. It was the latest terror attack to rock the country. Just one day before this, a suicide bombing took place in Pakistan's Balochistan province. It happened on a national highway near the city of Kalat. A female suicide bomber detonated explosives as a security convoy was passing by. 1 soldier was killed and 4 others were injured. A faction of the Balochistan Liberation Army militant group claimed responsibility for the attack. The BLA is a designated terror group in Pakistan. An Islamabad-based think tank said that 79 terrorist attacks took place in Pakistan in February. And so far, there are no signs of the attacks slowing down, even though it is the holy month of Ramzan. Instead of peace and calm, Pakistan seems set for more trouble than usual. Amid all the attacks, Islamabad has found time to pick a fight with neighboring Afghanistan as well. There has been a blockade at the largest border crossing between the two nations, the Torkham crossing. It has been shut since the 21st of February. The Torkham crossing is part of the main trade route between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Its closure has resulted in millions of dollars worth of losses. 5,000 trucks are reportedly stranded at the border, awaiting a return to normal trade. But instead, tensions escalated on Monday. There was cross-border firing, and reports say one member of the Afghan Taliban was killed. So was one of the stranded truck drivers, and several members of Pakistan's security forces were wounded. Thousands of people reportedly fled the border area after the clashes erupted. But not everyone has been able to escape. Truck drivers are still near the volatile crossing. Trade between Afghanistan and Pakistan usually spikes during Ramzan, food imports in particular. Afghanistan has been facing a humanitarian crisis since the Taliban took over in 2021. So, the Torkham border is an important lifeline for ordinary people there. But by the looks of it, the border will stay closed for a while, creating another powder keg situation in Pakistan.
Our next story is about oil, the liquid black gold that fuels all our lives. Oil prices have been falling for a few days, and yesterday they received another downward jolt because OPEC Plus decided to increase supplies. Crude oil is now trading at a 6-month low, which means that the price at your petrol pump may start going down. So how did this happen? To understand that, we need some context, starting with OPEC. As you may know, OPEC stands for the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. It is a cartel led by major oil exporters like Saudi Arabia. OPEC currently has 12 members, and they produce about 38% of the world's oil. That is OPEC. We are talking about OPEC Plus. This is an expanded group, basically the oil cartel and friends. Those friends include Russia, Kazakhstan, Mexico, Brazil, and others. The most important to note for now is Russia. In 2022, Russia began the war in Ukraine. The West imposed sanctions on Russian oil. This dented Russian oil exports, and after a while, Russia felt the pinch. Then in 2023, some OPEC Plus members decided to cut oil output further. Not all members, just some of them, including Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. They cut the output. Together, they slashed oil output by 2.2 million barrels per day. That was about 2% of the world's oil supply. It was reduced by 2%. This, of course, caused prices to surge. But why would OPEC Plus do such a thing? Because it made sense for some countries, chiefly Russia. Sanctions had hit Russian exports. It was selling less oil. So when prices went up, Russia could make more money by selling less oil. This sounds like artificially manipulating prices, and that's exactly what it was, because that is what cartels do. And OPEC Plus is no different. It lowered oil supplies to increase prices and raked in the profits. And it kept doing this over the past few years. It kept oil prices artificially inflated by intentionally lowering supplies. But now the cartel is planning to increase production again, to increase supply, starting from April. They will increase oil output slowly for about 18 months, they say, eventually going back to 2022 levels. And this decision was announced yesterday, and the news caused oil prices to tank. So the question is, why is OPEC Plus doing it? because of, and I'm quoting, healthy market fundamentals and the positive market outlook. That is what the group has said. That is their reason. But you should take that with a pinch of salt. At the beginning of this story, I said that oil prices had been falling for days. Even before the OPEC announcement, the prices were falling, and they had been falling for a number of reasons. I'll list out some of them. Last month, the International Energy Agency made a prediction. It said that global oil supplies would exceed demand this year. There will be more supply than demand. So even if they did not ramp up production, oil supplies would have exceeded demand. That is one factor. Factor number two is Donald Trump's trade war. He is imposing tariffs. China, Mexico, and Canada have already been hit. Others will be hit next month. And this will hurt global economic activity. And that means less demand for oil, because if people are not shipping as many goods, they don't need as much oil. That is the second reason why oil prices are contracting. And there were other reasons as well, like the global transition to electric vehicles and indiscipline within OPEC+, with cartel members not adhering to their quotas. So demand is down and supply is high, and this is why oil prices have been falling. The OPEC+ members have already been holding back production. Lowering it further would mean giving way to other oil exporting nations. Instead of risking that, they decided to boost production, to claw back some of their lost market share. That is one explanation. The second is Donald Trump. He had earlier asked Saudi Arabia to increase production. A few years back, when Joe Biden asked Saudi Arabia to increase production, he even flew down to Riyadh to plead with them. They rejected the American request. But Trump has a better equation with the Crown Prince. Plus, they may not want the headache of Trump's threats. So whatever the reason, the Saudis complied. Then there's the Russian angle. Reports say Trump is planning to ease sanctions on Russia to allow it to export more oil. If that happens, Russia will want to increase sales. So every way you look at it, increasing production made sense. And that's what OPEC Plus has decided to do. Now let's turn our attention to Serbia, where lawmakers have thrown smoke grenades, tear gas, eggs and water bottles inside the parliament. They were seen brawling on live television thanks to the clash. At least 3 MPs have been injured, including one legislator who suffered a stroke. Now these clashes came after months-long students-led protests that have brought the Balkan nation to a standstill. So why is anger simmering in Serbia, and what does this recent clash mean for the people? Here's a report.
Clouds of red and black smoke filling the air, parliamentarians leaping from their seats to brawl, and a banner being held up for all to see. Serbia has risen to bring down the regime. The Serbian parliament has witnessed all kinds of chaos in the past, from water being thrown to microphones being torn out. But the use of smoke bombs is unprecedented, and this marks a dramatic escalation to a saga that began about 4 months ago. In November, a recently renovated concrete canopy of a railway station caved in. It happened in Novi Sad, a city in northern Serbia. The canopy of its main railway station collapsed onto the pavement, killing 15 people. Many believe that this tragedy occurred due to hasty work by shoddy contractors, which led it to become a symbol of what many Serbians see as corruption at the heart of President Alexander Vucic's 12-year rule, and a flashpoint for growing discontent in the country. As anger hit the roof, vigils held for the dead of the canopy incident quickly transformed into massive months-long student-led protests. They have drawn crowds in seemingly every corner of the Balkan nation and brought the country to a standstill.
I think this is the moment when we have to stand by young people and their demands, which are actually demands for a normal life.
The whole world needs to see that we have a problem. What is happening in Serbia is not normal. It is up to that generation to raise the alarm, and it is up to the older ones to solve this situation.
The Vučić government's response has been mixed throughout. from promising concessions to dismissing the movement as a sham orchestrated by foreign governments. But despite this, the protests have continued, posing a threat to Vucic's hardline rule and fueling political tensions. In January, Prime Minister Milos Vucevic resigned from his position to calm the discontent. However, protesters believe it is a ploy to distract citizens and deflect blame. Which brings us to yesterday. The parliament was in session to confirm the Prime Minister's resignation. That's when outside, peaceful protests continued. Crowds held 15 minutes of silence for each of the victims. Meanwhile, inside, chaos erupted. As dozens of lawmakers gathered in the chamber, opposition lawmakers lit flares and tossed smoke grenades. As the room filled with smoke, matters escalated to physical confrontations. Parliamentarians hurled eggs and water bottles at each other, while some leapt from their seats to brawl with security guards. And this was the result. 3 members of the ruling Serbian Progressive Party were injured, including a pregnant woman. Among those injured, one suffered a stroke. This incident is making headlines the world over. After all, it is an unexpected result of long simmering anger. But can this incident do anything for the ordinary Serbian, or will their dreams of change continue to go up in smoke?
Donald Trump is a tough customer to deal with. We've seen many of his counterparts struggle to handle him. The latest example being Volodymyr Zelensky. But what is he like as a boss? I feel Marco Rubio would have a good idea. He's Trump's Secretary of State, basically America's foreign minister and America's top diplomat. Trump gave him a shout out during yesterday's speech. At first, Rubio was all smiles, but the smile disappeared as Trump carried on because the US president said, "Now we know who to blame if anything goes wrong." It's not the first time that Rubio was caught off guard. Take a look.
And we have Marco Rubio in charge. Good luck, Marco. Now, we know who to blame if anything goes wrong.
We know who to blame if anything goes wrong.
Marco's been amazing, and he's going to do a great job. Think of it, he got 100 votes. You know, he was approved with actually 99, but the 100th was this gentleman, and I feel very certain. So let's assume he got 100 votes, and I'm either very, very happy about that or I'm very concerned about it. Good luck, Marco. Now, we know who to blame if anything goes wrong. Marco's been amazing, and he's going to do a great job. Think of it, he got 100 votes.
Why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if do you own a suit?
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Police in Sao Paulo disguised themselves as superheroes to catch criminals during a carnival. A Hawaii volcano sent lava shooting over 150 feet into the air, and humanoid robots are set to run a half marathon in Beijing. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1946, Winston Churchill fired the opening shot of the Cold War at a college in Missouri. He declared that an Iron Curtain had descended over Europe. In the years that followed, the Iron Curtain symbolized the division between the Western Bloc and the Soviet Bloc. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. News.